Ashes by J.C. Jarrett. Chapter 3. Rogar's Vow. Rogar's head pounded where the sword hilt had slammed into his forehead. He rubbed the deep purple bruise absently as he laid by the small fire he had built along the road. Rogar had awoken under the tree near the clearing, and to his surprise all of his companions was dead, including Grover. He looked up at the canvas-covered wagon that had once belonged to Grover, and said, "I'm glad you're dead, you nasty bastard." He thought of all the loot that was left in the wagon, and never split among the crew. Of course the crew was dead now, so it was all his. He figured he would have enough to head back to the rusty spigot and try to woo the barmaid Mandy. Sleep was just about to take Rogar when the blade point touched his throat. "Rise and shine, Rogar," the strangely cadenced voice said. Jander seemed to unfold from the shadows, with the point of a short sword to his throat. "Looks like you're all that survived," the highborn stated needlessly. "Yeah," said Rogar with a bit of apprehensiveness. "Don't hurt me, take what you want." A strange expression crossed Jander's face. "Now, Rogar, I don't want to hurt you. I just want you to take me somewhere. I am so tired of walking." The morning sun bore into Rogar's eyes, bring back his headache from the night before. He sat in the driver's seat of the wagon, drifting in and out of sleep. The wagon had been rolling off and on all night. Several times the horse needed to rest. Rogar awoke and found the wagon stopped dead in front of an old, burnt ruin. He looked about, trying to get his bearings. A strange laughter came from the back of the wagon as he felt his passenger move toward the front. "Do you know this place?" the highborn asked the confused Rogar. "No." "This is where Grover murdered Westlake's father." He chuckled again. The highborn seemed to be getting better at the inflections of the human's common language, causing his words to flow much easier. The burnt ruin was barely a 5-foot blackened corner of the old 3-room house, and 2 carved stone grave markers, one showing much more weathering than the other. Jander jumped down from the wagon and started toward the graves. You see, Alistair in his excitement never even noticed that he did not find all of what he was looking for, the highborn said as if lecturing. Rogar felt the fool, because he had no idea who or what this highborn was talking about. He had seen Jander speaking with Grover, but he had no idea who Alistair was, or did he care for what he was looking for. He just wanted to get away, run to Mandy, and disappear from this nightmare he stumbled into. He watched Jander jump down from the wagon and move toward the grave markers, with a shovel taken from the wagon in hand. Rogar watched in confusion as Jander began to dig at the grave markers. Rogar spun just in time to see the charging blonde-haired warrior, his twin straight sabers dripping in the blood of Rogar's fallen companions. The blonde warrior's mouth opened, letting loose a great beam of light hitting Rogar square in the face. Rogar's eyes snapped open, and he immediately regretted it. The sunlight tore into his eye, causing him to squint in pain. He had apparently fallen asleep on the wagon's driver's seat, but he knew not how long. The skin on his face and exposed arms was bright red, scalded from the sun's rays. He sat up and looked over at where he had last seen Jander. To his surprise, the highborn was standing waist-deep in one of the graves, still digging at a steady pace. He hoped silently that the highborn would drop dead from exhaustion. Rogar thought that maybe he could escape from this crazy highborn while he was preoccupied digging. So as quietly as he could, he poked the solitary horse hooked to the wagon in the rear end, coaxing it onward. Jander dug shovelful after shovelful of dirt out of the grave, when suddenly this shovel hit something solid. "Finally," the highborn said impatiently. Bending down and dropping the shovel, he began to clear away the dirt from the wooden coffin. Grabbing the top of one of the slat boards of the lid, he pried with all his might. With a crack, the lid began to tear away. Jander looked into the opening and spotted what he was after. Reaching in, pushing past the tangles of dead, colorless hair, feeling the dried, mummified flesh and bone, the highborn searched around inside. After a few seconds, his slender hand bumped something, feeling it move under his touch. Grabbing the object, he pulled a circlet of gold and onyx, about 12 inches in diameter, out in his hand. Jander looked at the gold and black circle, A hollow gaped, seeming to have some small facets that looked like it could hold something more. Jander was so thankful for the Highborn's natural ability to sense magic. He had felt the huge amount when he and Peyton had passed by just 2 days ago, even though it felt much longer. When they had passed, he was not sure of what the magic was. But after he saw the object Alistair pulled from the Westlake's wall, he knew what it must have been. A wicked grin began to spread across the Highborn's ruined face, as he said to himself, "Alistair will shower me with gold and praise," the Highborn said with glee. Darton and Zara rode side by side at a light trot to conserve the horses, but when the activity at the ruin of Rand's home came into view, their speed was raised to a sprint. "What now?" Rogar called out in aggravation, as he spied 2 sprinting riders heading straight for him. He looked back to see Jander climbing from the grave. He could not hear what the Highborn said, but he was sure it was curses tossed his way. Rogar felt trapped. He did not know what was ahead of him, and he knew he did not want to face the dangerous Jander that was behind. The Highborn cursed Rogar's name as he looked beyond the wagon, spotting the horses heading directly toward the burnt ruin. "Why can't things just be simple?" he said as he looked down at the golden circlet in his hand, then back to the grave markers. The wicked smile that crossed the Highborn's face grew wider still. Darton squinted his eyes in an attempt to see what was going on at what used to be his Uncle Rand's house. He could barely make out the lone figure beyond the wagon. "What is happening here?" he spoke aloud. Jander raised the gold and onyx circlet. The band's size expanded magically to fit perfect as he placed it upon his brow. A strange sensation fell over the Highborn, almost as if he had been dunked in icy water. Closing his one good eye, he concentrated. He had the feeling that tendrils of thought were reaching across planes of existence, searching for something, or someone. The tendrils suddenly locked onto their targets, and enveloping the entities in a magical snare, dragging them back to this physical plane of existence, depositing the entities into remains of their past lives. All of this happened in less than a second. Then magical hatred and rage was poured out of the circlet, and imbued into the remains, along with the returned entities. Great explosion of force threw dirt and chunks of wood into the air above the dugout grave, and the ground began to churn, as if it was water. A dry, cracking skeletal hand reached over the edge of the opened grave, followed by another. As the hands grabbed the ledge and pulled, floating wisps of dead, colorless hair framed the green, glowing, empty eye sockets of the cracked, dirt-covered skull. As the skeletal remains continued to pull itself from its grave, another larger-framed skeleton broke through the churning earth of the neighboring grave. Jander watched in fascination as the skeletons clawed and dug their way from the graves that had held them. Ragged strands of dark matted hair hung from the other skeleton's skull. The 2 undead monsters finally freed themselves from their graves and started toward the nearest living thing, Jander. Jander eyed the undead things, then realized his huge blunder. He had no control over them. They shambled his way, bones cracking loudly with every step, as he swore silently under his breath, as he pulled and readied his wide-bladed sword, and again he repeated, "Why can't things just be simple?" Darton and Zara looked on in horror, seeing the undead skeletal monsters rising from their graves and start toward the unknown person. Darton felt revulsion rise in his throat at the thought that this was his Aunt Jana, who he had never known, and his Uncle Rand, who had trained him to fight and had treated him as a son. He was unsure if the monsters were just the decomposed body, or was it really the souls trapped inside. The sun streamed through the windows, casting shafts of golden light across the bed. Rand Westlake lay bare-chested on his left side. A smile spread across his face as he watched the sunlight glimmer in the golden strands of his wife's blonde hair. Jana laid next to him. Her head rested on a pillow, her face toward him. He suddenly had the thought that this was not real. He had images of having to cut open his wife and remove their child. Rand shook the images away, and in the process, watched as Jana's ice-blue eyes opened. She looked at Rand and smiled. He felt his heart flutter from just her look. He loved her so. "Good morning, beautiful," Rand said to her with a smile. Just like that, their world was turned upside down. Some kind of purple energy tentacle grabbed them, encasing them into a magical shell. Rand screamed for Janna and she for him, but neither could hear the other. Off the bed they raised, and passed right through the wall to the house. Their world turned into multicolored lights and strange shapes floating in the air. A sensation that was not unlike pain coursed through their ethereal bodies. Faster and faster they moved, their bodies seeming to stretch to infinity, when suddenly all was still. The pair was overcome with horrid pain and a great hunger for a need to kill anything living that crossed paths with them. Blackness invaded their minds, an unbridled rage that stole their very identity. They were nothing but observers in their own rotting corpses. The pair tried to scream, but nothing escaped the skeleton prison that encased their souls. This was hell. Rogar immediately began to beg for his life as Darton grew near. Zara looked at the stuttering man, hearing his excuses of just being a traveler that was attacked along the road by a crazy highborn. "Get out of here," she shouted with authority, never slowing her pace. Rogar snapped the reins of his horse to set it to trot. He looked back and nearly screamed at the sight of the undead monsters. He watched as the large warrior and the beautiful woman charged on toward the highborn and his creatures. "None of that nightmare," Rogar said as he snapped the reins faster in attempt to speed up the horse. "I just want to get away from this madness." Rogar then looked to the sky, its bright blueness stinging his eyes. "I swear, get me out of this, and I will turn over a new leaf." He snapped the reins again. "I swear."